Welcome to Define Play, where I interview fascinating people to find out what play means to them. My name is Michael Mirza, and my guest today is Jon Fogel, the author of Punishment-Free Parenting, Brain-Based Ways to Raise Kids Without Raising Your Voice. Jon is also a prolific content creator as whole parent, on top of being a pastor and a very hands-on dad. I have to tell you, when I first encountered Jon's book, I was unsure if I was going to get anything out of it for myself. I thought, I'm a decent parent. I've got a good amount of things that I feel like I've got working pretty well. The reality is I had so much to learn from this, and I didn't realize just how much I needed this for the sake of my own parenting, for the sake of my own emotional well-being. I really, really appreciated this, and I think you'll enjoy this conversation with Jon very much. Whether you're a parent or not, there's something in here for everyone related to how we approach boundary setting and learning, and generally striving for a richer, deeper sense of emotional health in the way we interact with kids and with each other. So I hope you enjoy this conversation very much. Let's go ahead and get started. Thanks. I think inherently, I would like to think I'm a decent parent. I'm proud of a lot of things that I do, and I also recognize parts of parenting in which it becomes the most humbling mirror of all the ways that I still need to grow. And when we started talking about making this together, it was so cool because what a gift it was to me to read your work and have it speak directly to me on a really personal level. And it quickly became, this is more than research prep. But this really spoke to me so much. So thank you for your leadership, and thank you for this time.
I'll just start by saying, I don't think that you're like a okay dad. I think you're probably an amazing dad. And part of that is that, honestly, when we do focus at any of our attention, like literally any of our intention towards being a better parent, almost overnight we become much better parents. Because the overwhelming amount of, I don't want to say harm, but just like not great parenting moments come when we're just not intentional, when we aren't thinking about what we're doing. And obviously we're talking about play today, but ultimately it really comes down to just, do you want to do better? And I think oftentimes the parents who are most critical of themselves are actually probably doing the best job. I've tried to remove that criticism for myself because I know it's not massively helpful to me.
Sure.
But at the same time, I'm glad that the book spoke to you. I think that the book speaks to everybody because I wrote it in a way that is for everybody. But obviously for certain people, it really resonates. So super excited to hear that.
Thank you. So for those who are not familiar with your work, can you just give us a kind of, give us a summary of what you're about, what you've put out there, and what you're thinking about lately?
Yeah, so basically I started in the parenting education world around the time when TikTok was starting to blow up. This is like 2020, 2021. And what I noticed was in my own parenting journey, there were all of these ways in which I had become a much better parent by reading certain books, by actually studying this stuff academically. And I was doing all of these things in my own life that felt like I had 3 kids in 2022, my third was born. I was doing all of this stuff during that time, but I wasn't seeing a lot of posts about it that were grounded in neuroscience, in developmental psych, and that type of thing. And I was giving out advice like candy to anybody who would listen to it because I truly, it changed my life to parent differently. And I had a particularly challenging time becoming a dad. I lost my own dad around the 1-year mark of my son's the 1-year birthday. And so all of that coming together basically brought me to this moment where I am sitting on my phone and I've given out all this advice and somebody says, you should make a TikTok video about this. And I make my first whatever TikTok video about it. Hey, if this is what your kid is doing, you should do this instead of, what you think you should do. Instead of yelling at your kid, get quiet, or instead of getting big and loud, get, soft, or whisper instead of yelling. Like all of these different things that I had learned from all of these amazing scientists and researchers. And immediately it just took off. Very few, I know the grind of social media from other things that I've talked about and other platforms that I've been a part of. This was not that. This was within 2 months, I had hundreds of thousands of followers of people just saying, give us more of this, give us more of this. And really it comes down to almost all of the experts agree on what great parenting looks like. And it's not nearly as hard as people think it is. But if you take that and look at the overwhelming majority of parents, none of us are given any of that information. Mm-hmm. And I come from a church background, and it's very similar. I know that you've been to some seminary. Mm-hmm. It's very similar to the experience of going to seminary and going, oh, all of the scholars, of course, not all of the scholars agree on anything in any discipline, but the overwhelming majority of scholars believe this. And then you walk into a local church and it's like, nobody thinks that. That was my experience with parenting. And there's all of this data and all of this information, all of this research and all of this amazing advice, and nobody has access to it. And so I just tried to make it really palatable. Mm-hmm. And I got picked up as a literary agent, saw a bunch of my content and said, would you like to write a book? And then we went through the pitch process, and eventually we came out with Punishment Free Parenting, which is my book. And that book has now taken off and has sold tens of thousands of copies, and it's been really, really cool to watch that. But really, it all comes back to that fundamental piece, which is most parents want to do better. Most parents care about parenting, and yet the resources that are available to them are either written at such a high level that it's impossible to understand. Yeah. What am I even supposed to take this? What am I supposed to do with it? Or they're just frankly not available. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I tried to do, and it's been really cool to see how that has impacted people like you, but just people on the street too.
You talked at kind of a high level about this, and I know in theory, there are of course lots of countless parenting resources out there. But one thing I don't often feel as a parent is the time and capacity to read those resources. So it really is amazing that you are learning from all these other experts and doing some of this work for us. In theory, again, I could go read all those books myself, but you're distilling it and helping people access and learn in ways that are more realistic and attainable for people.
My encouragement is always move from the short-term thinking to the long-term thinking. Mm-hmm. And so if you can get one book and it's my book and you can even listen to it, right? Like I don't read much because I have 4 kids. Same. But if you can just listen to my book, you're going to realize that, oh man, all of these tips and tricks and all these little hacks, and they might, they give it to you in 90-second sound bites, all of those point to something. And it's just a difference, a mindset shift in how we parent. Mm-hmm. And if we can do that, like 95% of our problems go away. Mm-hmm. Now, 5% is going to be there. Like yes. I cannot fix that trigger for you or that thing that your kid does that just like, they just can't, they don't know why they do it. But 95% of the time, parents are making things worse simply by trying to do what they thought they were supposed to do, which usually just looks like whatever happened to them.
Yes, absolutely. When you're talking about the ineffectiveness of punishment and the nuances of the differences between punishment and consequences, the importance of outlining clear boundaries, of honoring emotions, your entire whole parent framework, right, with your acronym, the biggest things that I take away, the importance of seeing part of the role of parenting is that we are facilitating learning, and that the fruit of learning is not just independence, but it is grit, it is confidence, resilience, emotional intelligence, all of these things, right? And all of that has something to do with what you're talking about here. And that becomes clear even in the very first chapter. I'm curious, because I'm guessing some other folks are wondering this as well, and I'm just genuinely curious too. Do you consider yourself part of the gentle parenting framework? I know you have some helpful critiques of the gentle parenting idea. Do you consider yourself part of that?
I think I do. So what I would say about the gentle parenting framework is that I don't use the word gentle parenting or the phrase or the term gentle parenting because it doesn't have a clear definition.
And it's very like meme-ified at this point.
So it's a straw man. It's kind of like in the political realm, like using a term like woke or whatever. Like basically it just means whatever the person wants it to mean, who's honestly most times weaponizing it. Yeah. So if it's the gentle parenting community who's using that term, they just turn it into whatever the best possible perfect parenting is. Oh, well, that's gentle parenting. and if it's the other side of people who maybe are more critical or hesitant to adopt some of the frameworks and some of the research that's out there, and who look at things and go, you know what, I like the traditional way of doing things in other places in my life. Maybe I'll raise my kids in a more traditional way, which we can get into kind of the misnomer behind that, because gentle parenting is also the most traditional parenting that you can get to, or whatever you want to call it, is the most like this goes back centuries, millennia. How we're offering to raise kids long before we had the neuroscience to back up why we did that. But whenever they're using the term gentle parenting, it's just boundary-free permissiveness, never
total
holding
passivity,
kids, total passivity, never holding kids accountable, and that's unhelpful to me. So to me, gentle parenting is always a straw man. It's just whatever, whoever is using the term. I know if I'm in very tight gentle parenting circles, I can use the term because they're going to interpret that term in one way. But I find that it's massively unhelpful. And here's a really specific one, Mike. It's really unhelpful for men. When talking to dads, I've met very few dads who come to this parenting having not seen the fruit of this labor and willingly call themselves gentle parents. Maybe that's some cultural baggage there and masculinity. But most of the men that I know, for them, the fact that I don't call it gentle parenting, I've been gotten feedback over and over. It's like, oh, I was way more willing to even entertain this idea. And oftentimes I get this phrase back, and this is one of my first videos. You scroll all the way back to my TikTok, like my 4th video or something, was my critique of gentle parenting. My initial critique came not from inside the movement, but from outside the movement, of saying, but life isn't gentle. And if we're raising kids in a gentle way, meaning everything around them is gentle, that's not good for them. Now, if we're raising them in a way where we are choosing to not cause them harm, and that's what we mean by gentle, like, sure, that's a great way to raise kids. But if we're saying we have to prevent all harm from befalling our kids, what we know from the research is that's actually a recipe for anxiety and depression later in life. Your kids have to struggle. They have to have accidents where they fall off the swing set. And this is actually a great segue to play too, because play is one of these places where parents try to overprotect their kids, and they wind up actually giving them an experience of life that does not prepare them for the real world. And their play becomes so gentle that, like I said, it's an anxiety and depression just like mixer, because they're not prepared to go through the rupture and repair cycle, not only in relationship, but also just like you fall off the slide and you get back up and you get back on. And if a parent is constantly catching their kid because they're trying to give them a gentle childhood, I think that that's a misuse of the term gentle parenting. But I think if that's the criticism of gentle parenting, I agree with that criticism. That's not good.
That's a great critique against the passivity that is sometimes projected on this idea of gentle parenting. And I also really loved this image you have in the book, that you tell a story that overlaps a lot with my interests, and you have this amazing story of sitting at a playground, sitting on a bench, and you're very much watching, paying attention. You're not just scrolling your phone and checking out while your kids walk down the block and you don't notice. You were there, you were present, but you're intentionally sitting at a distance from them on the playground. And you observed that most, if not all, of the other parents that you saw during the hour that you spent at this playground were very hovery. They were hovering just a few feet away from their kids and kind of preempting any possible fall. And then you talk about how your thought is sort of, yeah, you could fall, you might get hurt, but you're not saying that recklessly, and you're keeping an eye on that, and you have intentionally given them space so that they can learn through play. And they have more confidence and skill as a result of that, and something that's going to serve them well long term because of how you are fostering this confidence building on the playground by giving them space to learn and space to fall. I think it's so interesting. And the thing is, besides the awareness that you have given them and the opportunities for them to learn, in that same way, you also talk about the importance of being really selective about which playgrounds you go to. And that some playgrounds are designed better than others and have better materials that are more conducive for the possibility of falling. And the layout is better for the age and was designed. And of course, there's a spectrum of playgrounds, and kids can make play in their own ways on any play space, right? But the importance of the design of the playground as a way of facilitating learning and being a place for confidence to grow, I think this is an amazing metaphor for the importance of designing boundaries and the communications that happen in parenting that not only facilitate play, but help kids flourish, and by teaching them and facilitating learning and a deeper emotional intelligence and confidence as well. It's a really amazing image.
Absolutely. So it's in the chapter on boundaries. And I probably place a little bit more stock than I do in real life on how much I'm selective of playgrounds. I tend to be more like, honestly, if I had my way, I would just set my kids loose in the forest. And I'd just say, like, okay, go nuts.
I mean, that's
right?
my dream too.
Yeah, like just go nuts. My kid goes to forest school, so my son, spends, other kids come home with homework, my son comes home with ticks.
Yeah.
And I think that there's I don't want to place too much like parents, because that becomes its own thing of just like, oh, is that like the right playground, or like, oh, there's a broken swing here, we can't go here anymore. And I don't want to put too much on that. Obviously, different communities have different income levels and different community support structures, and in certain low-income communities there may not be a playground. I think that where it really works, and my 4 kind of pillars of parenting, I'll just kind of give away half the book, is number 1, we have to get curious about behavior. That's kind of goes beyond our scope today, but this concept of getting curious rather than being furious, that we assume kind of the best out of our kids, and we look for the ways in which their behavior is manifesting, maybe as misbehavior, is actually an unmet need that needs to be have our facilitation in meeting that need or building the skills to meet that need. Beyond the first one, then it's modeling, number 1, which I think massively we have to talk about when we talk about play, because so many adults model a supremely unhealthy life to their kids. And I'm not talking about drinking and smoking and sitting on the couch all day. I am talking about technology use, the way that we model technology use, but also just, do we model having good relationships in front of our kids? Do we model rupture and repair with our kids? Do we model play? Do we play in front of our kids? Do our kids see that in us? There's a great episode of Bluey it's called Fruit Bat, where Bluey is asking her dad why he doesn't play football anymore with his friends. And he's like, well, because I'm taking care of you so much. But there's this moment of her realizing, like, oh, he plays too. Like, that's beautiful. And almost the episode includes her having a dream about him playing. It would almost be better if she actually saw him play, right? Because that's a powerful tool for us. So modeling is number 2. Number 3 is consequences. And when we think about consequences are best lived out naturally, meaning the parent doesn't have to impose a consequence. The consequence is naturally occurring. Great consequence. Climb to the top of the slide, and you're not paying attention, you're talking, and you fall off the slide. Great consequence. Oh, John, they could sprain their ankle. Yep, they could. Great consequence.
Yep. More likely to be a teaching moment than you stepping in and saying, don't climb that.
Don't climb that, or I'm going to catch you, or whatever, right? Because your kid, as I talk about in a course that I teach, when your kid fails to fall off the slide, they think they can fly. Because you'll always catch them. And your kid can't fly, right? And so you wonder why the kid jumped off of the roof when they're climbing out their window when they're a teenager. I don't want to say it's a direct line, but kids who know how to fall don't make those same types of decisions. You have to be hurt in the small ways to prevent yourself from being hurt in the big ways. So that's consequences. The last one is boundaries, and the really big one with boundaries, and this is where it goes into play, and this is why I talk about the perfect playground analogy, is that boundaries are not about controlling your child's behavior. This is like what I really want to remove myself from this worldview, because some people just say, I'm gonna have strong boundaries. And what they mean is I'm gonna dictate everything in my child's life. I'm gonna be a dictator. I'm gonna just control everything. That's not boundaries. Boundaries is setting up a perimeter, which probably has to be a little bit bigger than you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
And then within that perimeter, getting the heck out of the way. And that is true boundaries are total freedom underneath the boundary. And so when I talk about in the beginning of the chapter, my son, we have a boundary where my son has to wear a helmet when he rides his bike. The reason for that is because I otherwise basically do not limit him riding his bike. If he picks up a board and puts it on another board and he wants to make a ramp and I'm like, you're gonna fall, I might even tell him like, hey, you're probably going to fall when you're doing this. But you can totally do it if you want to. That's the total and complete freedom that exists within the boundaries. And I think that once parents understand that, they realize, oh man, it's actually much easier to set up good boundaries and then stay out of the way than it is to constantly be policing every single thing that my kid does.
Yes.
And that is actually what I think is the most exhausting part of modern parenting. The reason why parents stick their kid on YouTube or whatever is because it feels safer. The parent needs a break. They need to go take a shower. They can't trust their kid with anything other than a tablet because, well, what if they fall in the toilet and drown when I'm gone? You can have good boundaries and you can actually prevent a lot of those fears. And it frees you up to do so many more amazing things. Fred Rogers, probably the greatest parenting voice in history, says play is the work of childhood. And what we often fail to realize is that when we set up so many boundaries that we're actually controlling everything that our kid does, they're not playing. And by the way, this is true of almost every adult supervised activity. And when I say, I shouldn't say adult supervised, I should say adult led. What I was doing at the park on that day was I was supervising by being so far back that even if I had wanted to go and catch them, I couldn't. And that was a boundary for me. Let them fall. Be there to pick them up and comfort them when they do. That's good, gentle parenting.
Yeah.
But you have to be willing to let them fall. And if you aren't, they're not doing the play that they need to develop. And we know from Harvard, other people, Jonathan Haidt wrote a fantastic book about this, overprotecting kids in the real world and underprotecting them online. We know that's the recipe for anxiety and depression in adolescence. It's the greatest mental health crisis of our era. We need to take this stuff seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. So much good stuff in there. Thank you. Couple things. I love the fact that you're saying you might let them fall, but again, you're thinking about long-term learning, and that allowing this sort of play and risk is really setting them up better for an understanding of how to carry themselves more independently as a teenager or as an adult. And, you talk about a good range of ages in the book. And, early on, you have this really sobering moment of, talking about if you're not making it safe for kids to talk through hard things now, why would you expect them to come to you when they're teenagers and doing much more dangerous things and thinking that they're going to feel safe to approach you then? So in a way, this idea of, teaching them safety and giving them space to fall now is all laying the groundwork for better trust and communication later. So that there's this expectation of when your kid is 18 or 22 and is now living by themselves, still figuring out life and, adulthood with training wheels, that they can be, and you're not always going to be there, but you have helped them understand that you will still come to support them when they do fall, and that you're a safe person they can talk to when things happen to them, and you are going to be there for them even in the hard things.
And probably the best analogy for this is understanding that you don't have as much control over, and this is a really hard pill, especially for the teenage parents that I talk to. And there are a lot of teenage parents that I coach through and I counsel. A really tough pill for many of them to swallow is that they don't really have nearly as much control as they think.
I feel that way now about my kids who are in elementary school.
Right.
Yeah.
And you already understand this. There are many parents of teenagers who think if I do X, Y, and Z right, I can stop my kid from doing these things. You can't. And I rarely talk about my own way that I was parented, by and large because it was generally pretty good. There was some punishment that I think my parents could have done better things if they had had more tools and been better equipped. I will say, and this is something that I've recently come to this realization, my parents, I cannot remember a time when my parents punished me in high school. They realized about at 14, there is no point in trying to control this child's behavior. We've done the discipline. Now we have to be there in a supportive role. And the best analogy that I always give to parents is you can't be the boss. You think that you're their boss or their warden. You're not, and you can't be as much as you want to be, but you can be their consultant. The difference between the boss and the consultant is where the money goes. In a boss relationship, the money goes from the boss to the worker. And so the boss has total and complete control over what the worker does, and the only control that the worker has is saying, well, I don't want to do that, I quit, right? Your kids can't quit you, but they can just not listen to you. In a consultant role, who gets the money? The consultant, because you want to follow their instructions. When a consultant tells you to do something, you do it not because they're forcing you to, but because you know them to be a trustworthy source of information. And when parents do this well at 2, 3, 4, 5, they set themselves up as a future consultant for their kid, where their kid comes to them and says, hey, should I do this? You've been on this earth longer. There's no vested interest in me hiding this thing from you. Thinking about drinking tonight for the first time, what are your thoughts on that? I'm getting serious with my girlfriend. And a lot of people think that's an impossibility.
Yeah.
No, your kid will never do that. And I often reflect back to them, right, just like many people thought it was an impossibility to raise kids without punishment. And yet, so many people, thousands of people all over the world do it and have far better results. The only reason you think it's an impossibility is because it probably was an impossibility in your home growing up. In no small part because you would have been met with punishment. And so that's the hope that I try and move parents towards, is parenting in this way leads them to that.
I love that. I think when I look at our parents' generation and before them as well, we sometimes talk about nurture and nature. And I think if I had to guess and oversimplify the way our parents parented us was, the whole raise up the child in the way you want them to go. If we nurture correctly, the nature will follow and unfold.
Right.
And I think more and more we're seeing that the research is pointing to the nature is much stronger in kids than the nurture. And when we recognize how little control we have and how the older they get, every year the amount that we can control them decreases, the nurture role shifts. And instead of trying to shape the nature, now we are saying, I'm going to nurture your nature by essentially saying, can I provide you a place of safety and trust and love and acceptance so that your nature can unfold, even if it's not the nature I wanted for you?
Yeah, I mean, so the big work here is in epigenetics, and I know
never heard that term before.
You've never heard the term
epigenetics?
Epigenetics. So the big term here is epigenetics, and basically how that works is all of us are hard-coded with our genetics. What we don't often think about is the expression of those genes and the way that nature shapes the expression of those genes. And so kids, there can be kids who have, for example, genetics that would lead them to be more likely to be an addict. We think about that a lot. That's one of the ones that we kind of see a lot. But depending on the environmental factors growing up, that genetic marker can actually, it's basically a binary. It can be either flipped on or off. And you can have the same person who has no addiction struggles, even though they had the genetic makeup for addiction struggles because of the nurture. So it's not as simple as nature versus nurture, or we have no control, or we do have control. It's really a dance of, we don't know exactly what our kid is. We don't know if you have a highly sensitive kid or a kid. We're talking now about whether or not certain neurodivergence is exacerbated epigenetically based on parenting. So we're even seeing kids who are ADHD or be far less symptomatic because of the way that they were parented, rather than other kids because they were raised around constant stimulation of sensory information, which just makes them seek more and more and more. So the fancy term here, epigenetics, basically just means it's always still both. I think we do still have an amazing opportunity to change our kids for the better. I also think because of neuroplasticity, we're learning that even if we do everything right or everything wrong, there's an amazing capacity to change over time. And what we're seeing, just to kind of take us on a little bit of a tangent, is that bad parenting and good parenting both stretch into the future much farther than we initially thought, and in much more varied ways. So some of the work that my sister-in-law is actually doing as a behavioral neuroscientist is finding neural pathways outside of the brain in our bodies. And the big breakthrough here happened 10 years ago, where we discovered all of these neural pathways in our gut, and we were able to link very clearly, a very considerable link between adverse childhood experiences, things like trauma, abuse, being in foster care, like all of these things, having a parent who's been in prison, adverse childhood experiences with autoimmune diseases. Whoa. So we didn't know that people had, that a child experiencing abuse could then one day in the future develop autoimmune disease or tons of different irritable bowel syndrome, tons of these gut related things. And it wasn't about they ate too much gluten. It was literally they were abused as a child. That tripped the epigenetic marker for autoimmune disease, and they're sunk at 35 years old. And so there's a great book about this called Childhood Disrupted. But understand, I think when we say nature and nurture, I think it's massively important to say simultaneously, you can't control everything, you're never going to be perfect. And the good news here is you only have to be good about 45% of the time to be excellent. 40% good parenting is the gold standard of good parenting. So if you're I'm not
that
even
feels attainable.
Yeah, I'm not even a good parent half the time. It's that's fine. As long as it's 40% of the time, you're okay. So good parenting 40% of the time, and really reducing any of those really significant harms like long-term abuse, and don't try and stay out of prison and keep your kid in your home. Those things are going to reduce those adverse childhood experiences. On the other hand, if we don't do those things well, it can run wild. Mm-hmm. And so I think it still matters, but it matters in a way that the nature-nurture conversation is different than it once was.
Thank you. I want to take it back to play, and it has something to do with modeling too. But again, back to this playground idea. This is one of the things that I want to get your take on. And when you are allowing them risk in that moment, but you're also allowing kids to play by themselves, I often feel a tension in parenting related to play. I can very easily imagine the brain benefits of kids playing by themselves and getting to shape the way they play and using their imagination and having full autonomy and freedom. Totally think that's a really important and beautiful thing. I also see the value of connecting with your kids through play and sharing experiences. And so when I see my kids building Legos and I say, hey, can I build Legos with you? The way their faces light up, and they were in this great creative flow state with the Legos on their own, right? That's great. Now I come and say, hey, you want to build something together? They say yes, they're excited. But now we're having a really different experience of play. Still a good experience, but it's a different experience of play. What do you think is the right way to approach intentionally encouraging solo play and then doing the hard thing, which it might sound weird to call playing with your kids the hard thing, but truly, sometimes it really is the hardest thing to sit down and play with them. What's the balance between solo play and shared play?
Yeah, a couple things. I think number one, solo play has benefits. Those benefits are only so many. And so when I think about solo play, when I'm thinking about a not adult intervention play, I'm really thinking about peer play. So the more opportunities that you can get for your kid to be with peers without adults leading, those two things just by themselves, you're going to have a hard enough time finding 3 times a week to get that to happen.
Yeah.
We're really intentional. We're very lucky that we live next door to a family from Jordan. They're gone all summer, so we don't get to see them, but they're from Jordan, and they have a much more independence-oriented mindset around their kids. And so our kids can play outside of our house basically 2 to 3 hours a day most of the year. That's incredibly rare. Most parents think, oh, I need to get my kids socialization. The way I'm going to do that is school. School is increasingly adult-led. Even school that you and I went to, Mike, we had recess. We probably had some sort of free time during reading time. We probably had some sort of free time during lunch. We probably had some sort of free time during PE. Also, arts classes afford you a lot more time as you're sitting and drawing to talk to your friends, whatever. Arts are being cut, recess is being cut, lunch is being more chaperoned, the silent reading time is all but gone. Those things, now we need to refocus as a community. And if you're looking for the tension, it's actually to give our kids more opportunities to play together. And to work things out and to not intervene. Like if they're arguing over the rules, to just step back and let them argue. Like it's way more important that they learn how to argue with each other than it is that they play Monopoly the correct way, right? So that's thing one. Thing two, and so when we're talking about, so if it's that type of play, I'm never intervening because it's so rare and fleeting. I've literally like changed my plans. I've like, oh, we're supposed to go to the grocery store right now. I can't because he's doing this thing that's so developmentally important for him.
Wow.
I will do everything. Oh, but like a lot of parents will say, but they have homework. You have my permission to miss every single homework assignment if your kid is playing collaboratively with another kid. I don't think any education mind in the world thinks that is more important than the social emotional learning that's happening, and even the cognitive development that's happening in peer play. Solo play is a little different in that there is a relational component that you can bring in. And I think those are the moments when you can say, hey, is my cup filled? Do I need to intervene? No, not necessarily. They can still be doing good development and learning, but when your cup's full and you want to play, my advice is join the play as a participant under their leadership. And if you can do that, you will never meet the same standard as a peer, because in an argument with you, they know you're right. That's not true of the peer, and so there's a lot more social emotional learning that can take place. But at least in the standard of with you following them into their world, as hard as that may be, that's where play experts like Dr. Tina Payne Bryson and others have said, hey, this is actually the best. This is the gold standard for play. And so if you want to join Lego and start building along, instead, you can build your own thing in parallel play with your kid. That's also beautiful. But if you want to join them, my wife is the best at this. She holds her guy and she just repeats whatever the guy is supposed to say. And so I even struggle with this because I'll say something as the guy, I'll add a little conflict. I'll be, oh no, don't do that. And then my wife's like, that was you leading, that was you taking the story. I'm like, but it's improv. And she's like, it's not improv. It's you following them.
Yes.
And so you can still be socially connecting. What they're learning in that moment is mom and dad can hear me and they can understand me and they want to play with me. And that is beautiful. And I don't want to take that away from any parent. So you should definitely do that.
My daughter loves to draw, and she will kind of draw, and she loves to also construct games. I think her favorite materials to work with are probably tape and scissors. She's kind of like a little sculptor, also loves to draw. But she loves to use paper and tape to cut out pieces to create games. And it's sort of like when she's inviting somebody into a game she has made, which is usually me, her mom, or her brother, the experience of playing one of her games is interesting because, well, the games are always sort of weighted in her favor. But when I play with her, if I can suspend this concept of fairness or anything like that, it doesn't really matter. The game doesn't have to truly make sense. She's inviting me into her world. And it's actually probably a good thing in some ways for her confidence, and maybe even developmentally appropriate that she weights the game in her favor, because what she's really doing is exerting her creativity. And she wants to take me on a journey. And if I can suspend my sense of, oh, there's all these contradictions in this, and this is not the right way to play this, if I can just suspend that and say, like, this doesn't seem like a real game, and I just enter into her world, it's really cool to think that she is hosting me and facilitating an experience for me, and what that does for her brain to be given the space and have that her creativity honored in that way. It's really powerful and good.
I think that that's really powerful, and I think what you're doing is you're kind of going back to the beginning of our conversation. You're setting away the short-term goal for the long-term goal. Mm-hmm. A lot of parents fail to do this. They look at play, or they look at anything else, discipline, and they go, in this moment, teaching her that that's not fair is the most important thing that I can do. Mm. It's just not.
Yeah.
It's just not. In the same way that Peter Gray gives this example in his book about kids fighting over the rules of basketball, and he's standing watching these middle schoolers or high schoolers, they're arguing over who got fouled and what's the rule and how you're supposed to play, and they have like an hour to play basketball, and they argue for 45 minutes. And this other mom is here next to him, and she's like, oh, gee, it would have been so much nicer if there was an adult that was willing to referee for them, because then they could have spent their time playing basketball. And he goes, how many of these kids is going to go to the NBA? Mm-hmm. How many of them is even going to play in college? Mm-hmm. How many of them are going to have to learn how to work out differences with their colleagues and peers?
Yeah, that's so good.
Like, which one of these is actually what we're searching for our kids? We often abandon the best education moments so that we can teach them lesser goals and lesser things. And so in that moment of saying, well, it's not fair, great news, Mike, she's going to learn that the first time she tries to play her game with a peer.
Exactly. And there's your natural consequence coming out where, it's better for her friend to be like, I don't want to play with you when you play like that.
100%.
Than for me to tell her this game's not fair.
Right. And also just understand that when we do this, we're actually interrupting what I believe play is, which is play at its core is not adult supervised. And so if we interject our opinions about their play, we are no longer entering their world as a willing participant. We are now entering their world as the boss. And they don't want that. Mm-hmm. If the game is really not working out well and she says, well, I just can't figure out why it doesn't work, you can then go, do you want my take on this? But the last thing I'll offer on this note is anybody who's been in a successful marriage understands this. Your partner brings to you, I just had this rough day at work, and here's all the problems that I had. If you immediately are like, well, yeah, of course you had those problems because you could have just done this and then you would have totally avoided that problem. Terrible marriage advice, right?
Yeah. Not what they're looking for.
They want you in that moment to just go, that's rough. That's so hard. And then maybe down the road they'll go, yeah, I just don't even know why that happened. Do you think maybe it was because of this? When they ask you for that, now you're like, oh, I can always go to my partner and they always know the right thing to say. Versus every time I bring something to my partner, they just try to fix it.
Yes.
Which is just so annoying.
Yes.
And if any of us just treated our kids a little bit more like we treated our partners, or just treated them a little bit more like adults, I think we'd be a lot better off. If your kid's throwing a tantrum because they're not getting their way in a game, you actually know how to deal with adults who throw tantrums.
Yeah.
And it's not by saying, stop that, I don't want to listen to this whining. And that's the moment where we can really do the best parenting work.
I love it. We talked a lot about how kids play. And by the way, I love the Bluey reference. I think Bandit is probably absolutely my favorite fictitious dad goals in many ways. I want to talk about how you play. And you as a person, Jon, you pour out and give to people in so many ways. As a parent, as an author, as a creator, as a pastor, as a coach. In all these ways, you are giving and helping others thrive and play. And I actually want to bring up Bluey one more time, because there's another episode, and I don't remember the name of it, but I know there's a stump in the yard. It might just be called the stump. So the girls are using this stump as a makeup studio or something like that. But Bandit and his friends have a chore that day to remove this stump from the yard. And it's great because it's this very kind of fun metaphor of this like environmental activism protest moment. But the reason I want to bring this up is as a way of hearing about the way you play so Bandit is doing a yard work task. The girls want to use the stump as a play area. So they work out a deal with Dad that they can use it to play for a little bit, and then at some point they're going to stop playing, and then Bandit and his friends are going to remove the stump. Well, when it comes to that moment, the girls don't want to stop playing, and they're upset. So they go talk to Mom, they go talk to Chili, and she helps them see that what Bandit and his friends are doing by removing the stump it looks like work, but they are actually playing in their own way. She looks over at Bandit and his friends. They're having a blast doing this manual labor, removing a stump, but when they get the stump out of the ground, they rejoice, they high five, they're having a great time. And I know sometimes for adults, play can look a little bit like this. And I know you're a pretty handy guy too, and maybe the ways that you are handy don't always feel like play. Maybe they feel more like work. But yeah, what does play look like for you, John, related to that and just in general?
For me, play looks like something different. And to do that, just to segue really quickly, I know that your show is called Define Play. I think I have to define play before I say what my play is, because if I don't define play, it's not going to make sense.
I love it.
So my definition of play comes from the research and specifically the neuroscience of play. And this really interesting thing that I learned, I think this is from Peter Gray's book, where I often talk about the different states of the brain and being in learning mode versus being in fight or flight. And basically all of my teaching, the reason I am punishment-free parenting is because punishment sends your kid into a decidedly non-learning state, into fight or flight, where they can't learn the thing that you're trying to teach them. So when you, the quote from the book is, when you punish a kid to teach them a lesson, you turn off the part of their brain that learns. So we have this fight or flight mode where our kid is afraid and we know that they can't learn. Then we just have kind of autopilot mode, which is just kind of when we're doing our everyday tasks. Sometimes we can daydream during those times. Oftentimes we have to be a little bit more focused on our tasks, but we're kind of just beige, right? We're not like doing anything that's particularly interesting to us. Then we have flow state, which is what you and I do when we're in these conversations. Mm-hmm. It's what Bandit was doing when he was trying to remove the stump. It's what artists do when they get into their best work. And the best way to describe flow state to people, you know those things that you can do where just time just is gone, right? And you look at your clock and you go, oh my gosh, wait, it's been an hour, it's been 2 hours, it's been 3 hours, I can't even believe it. That's flow state. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is we call it flow state, but when we scan people's brains who are in that state, an artist creating or playing or whatever, their instrument, and you have a child who's playing with friends or making up the rules to a game, the brains look identical. Mm-hmm. And so play to me is anything that I do that I find myself in flow state, because that's the technical, like kind of neurological, for lack of better terms, neuroscience-y way that our brains experience play. Yeah. And so anytime when time feels like it's just gone, and when I look at my life, I have really set up my life now to, and I'm very blessed to be able to do this, to almost only do things where I find myself in flow state. So when I'm in my pastoral roles, when I'm doing pastoral counseling, that's a very flow state thing for me as an extrovert, as a counselor. When I'm writing a sermon, or when I'm writing a talk for whatever, when I'm on a TV show as whole parent, or when I'm giving an interview, or when I'm writing, when I wrote the book, all of these things I found myself in flow state. And actually in all of those ways, I really was filling my play cup. And I know that sounds like a cop-out, because I just spent at the beginning saying our kids need to see us play. But I will actually pull my kid aside when I'm editing a video or a podcast. I get this way with my podcast, or I can go into flow state when I'm adding the music and stuff, and I'm just like, this is so cool. And I'll actually bring him in, and I'll bring him behind the curtain, and I'll say, like, this is how I play. This is what play looks like for Dad. Mm-hmm. And when you're in those flow states and you're really going, that's also the time, by the way, that your brain learns the most. It's the time this is why, like, when you make up a silly song or a silly mnemonic, it actually activates the play circuits in your brain, and all of a sudden that thing becomes easy to remember. Mm-hmm. It's why I sing every instruction to my kids so that it's silly and playful. Mm-hmm. It's why when to get really dark and down, I know this is from Peter Gray's book, it's why kids who are trapped in Nazi ghettos during the Holocaust would play out SS officer and Jew in hiding. Mm-hmm. They would play that game in these concentration camps, and it was every instinct of these parents to say, don't do that. Mm-hmm. But actually, it was how they learned. It was how they processed. It was how they dealt with their feelings. And so
it was play therapy.
It was play therapy. And so the more time, and I think really all good therapy is play therapy. The more time we spend in flow state working out our stuff, the better parents we can be, the better lives we can live. And so play to me is any time when I get to do that. It's every night after 7 p.m. when I hang out with my wife, and I don't even know what we're gonna do, but I know that it's just gonna be us. I'm gonna be in flow state. It's gonna go from 7 to 10 like that. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't, we're fighting. Mm-hmm. Like, that was the only reason. And so that's how I play. And it might feel like a cop-out. I also have 4 young kids. I think I'll probably get back to playing volleyball. I think I'll probably get back to playing disc golf more. When my kids are a little older, I empathize with Bandit in the Fruit Bat episode, that I don't get to do those things right now. But I also play with my kids, and that's a beautiful way to play.
I love that there are the 3 simple ways of seeing the brain, that there's sort of these different brain states of survival mode, which we know punishment triggers. There's the more passive mode of just kind of being on autopilot. And then there's this flow mode, which is a lot more like play. And the more we pay attention to the way the brain shifts between these states and how quickly parenting can fling us from one state to another, from flow state to quickly going to survival state and being really reactive and vice versa, the more attentive we can be to that, the better.
Or when we become really, really good personal feelings detectives, what we realize is so often those things that are so triggering that our kids do, the reason that they can send us into that mode is, number one, either they're from our own childhood, or number two, we were already hungry. Mm-hmm. We were already tired. We were already stressed out from work. It has nothing to do with the spilled milk.
Absolutely.
It has nothing to do with the crayons on the walls.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that stuff can be fixed. But it feels so triggering because we were already out of time.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jon, so much for your wisdom. Is there a closing word of encouragement you would offer to a parent who feels motivated to take a look at some of the ways they've been parenting and think about how they can work play in for their kids and for themselves?
Yeah, the best advice that I have is that really excellent parenting, number one, nobody's perfect. If you do it 40% of the time good, you're great. That's good enough. So it's not a particularly impossible standard, but really excellent parenting actually makes your life a lot easier. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people say, I don't have time to become a great parent, or I don't have time to do my own work or figure this stuff out. I'm just surviving. And what I say to those people over and over and over again is, you will have no idea 6 months from now, a year from now, how much easier your life would have been if you had just done that. And so you want the encouragement of play, take every single discipline moment with your kid from now until the 2 months from now, and try and make every single one of them a game in some way.
That speaks to me.
Make them in a game some way, right? Like if kids can play SS officer in concentration camp, like, your problems are not too big for them to play through them. No matter what the situation, learn how to turn that thing into a game. And if you can do that, you will never have to discipline a day in your life because your kids will learn self-discipline. And I can tell you, as someone with my third one is giving me a run for my money right now. He's 3 and he's really pushing me. I made up a song about patience today because he didn't want to wait. And like he was singing it to himself later when he had to be patient about something else.
Yes.
Like
Daniel Tiger does that so well.
Well, Fred did that. I mean, we could have a whole power of music. And
But
how it
you're
affects
making
the brain,
your own, which is so much more powerful.
Yeah, well, you just have to be willing to be goofy, though.
Yeah.
Like, and you have to be willing to be silly, and you can do amazing things.
And sometimes I'm like, they don't deserve my silliness. They haven't earned it. And so I'm like, okay, well, do you want to just keep digging your heels into the next half hour?
Yeah.
Because we could do that. Or
Yeah, but you know who does deserve your silliness? You. You deserve the parenting experience that is being silly with your kids when you don't feel like it.
Yes.
You deserve that because you've had a hard day, and you don't deserve having to yell at somebody for the next 10 minutes. Nobody likes it.
Yeah.
You deserve it, Mike.
Wow.
Even if your kids don't deserve it, which I would argue they do, but because they always deserve us. But you deserve it. And so if you can't work it up to doing it for them, do it for you, because your life is going to be so much better.
What a beautiful reminder that this work of working on ourselves for the sake of parenting is not just for our kids. It is for ourselves and for our whole family.
Can I say one thing before we end? Because you just said something that I love. The part of the book that I didn't realize when I wrote Punishment-Free Parenting, I wrote a book that was about not punishing your kids because it didn't work. What I didn't realize was that the overwhelming majority of times I was punishing my kids, I was just punishing myself. Wow. And it wasn't working.
Nope.
And so it's exactly what you just said. And I just want to end with this. If you really want to stop punishing yourself, this is also the work that you have to do.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Jon.
Appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you.
I think Jon's closing point about all of this being just as much for the well-being of us as parents as it is for the well-being of our kids is so profound and helpful, and really genuinely spoke to me. I hope it spoke to you as well. You can learn more about Jon on our website, defineplay.com, where you can also find an awesome playlist of songs that he put together that help him feel playful. I think he's tested his playlist with his kids as well, and pretty good solid set of songs. You can pick up Punishment-Free Parenting on wherever you get books, I suppose, as well as an audio book, which is read by Jon himself. This is an awesome resource, and if you enjoyed learning about Jon or learning this conversation, please send this to somebody else who you think might enjoy it as well. If you wouldn't mind, give us a subscribe to help us grow our channel so we can keep having these awesome conversations with amazing people like Jon. Thanks again for watching. We really appreciate it, or listening, and we hope to catch you next time. I'm Michael. Talk to you later. Thanks.